On Friday, Grammaticus Books posted his top 10 Sword and Sorcery movies, and Michael K. Vaughan, Steve Donahue, and Stygian Dogs have all followed suit. And unfortunately, they're all very wrong. And so I thought I should, you know, give you the definitive list. So, first, let me just say that, as you can see back here, Excalibur is one of my favorite movies of all time. It is not a sword and sorcery movie. So it is not going to be on my list and shouldn't be on yours. It's a great fantasy film though. And I love it. Arguably my favorite movie of all time. But there you have it. All right, so number 10, 2011's Season of the Witch. I know you're going to say it's a terrible movie, but hear me out. It's not. Nicolas Cage, he sleepwalks through the whole thing. Ron Perlman is Ron Perlman through the whole thing. But it's a fantastic story with decent enough special effects. And that makes up for the kind of wooden acting you get in it. As a sword and sorcery film, it's top notch. And my son and I both really enjoy it. And it deserves to be on the list, in my opinion. So, number 9, my son and I went over this weekend, and he disagrees here, but my number 9 is 1985's Legend from Ridley Scott, starring Tom Cruise, Mia Sara, and Tim Curry. Yes, it's a little more fantasy, but it's just a great film, and I think fits into that sword and sorcery mold. Cruise's character is not as bold as you usually expect from a sword and sorcery protagonist, but still, it's a great film, and I think deserves to be on the list. Next, we have one that everybody touched on, and that's 1985's Lady Hawk, starring Rutger Hauer and Michelle Pfeiffer and Matthew Broderick. Great film, just a wonderful premise. It really struck home. In '85, I was 19 years old, so yeah, it was a great time to be watching films, and that one was fantastic. My number 7 is Solomon Kane from M.J. Bassett, starring James Purefoy. Came out in 2009, and it's not a great Solomon Kane film per se, but as an introduction to Kane, it's really good. I know Steve Donahue doesn't care for Solomon Kane at all, but yeah, I love the character. There's sword and sorcery elements, there's occult detective elements. Really strikes home, and it really has that horror element to it. At least the books do. And yeah, this is just a really good film, and I really wish that audiences would have caught on to it and we would have got more from them. Number 6, from 1973, we're going with The Golden Voyage of Sinbad. That was Gordon Hessler was the director. Had Tom Baker, Carolyn Monroe, John Philip Law, and it's my favorite Sinbad film. It's just a great adventure. You get those Harryhausen effects, and it's just fantastic, and it's fun throughout. And I actually read the comic first. For that Marvel did an adaptation of it, and so I longed to see that film, and I finally got to see it at the drive-in, as a kid, and it was everything I wanted it to be. And Carolyn Monroe, right? So, number 5, 1982, good year for fantasy. Sword and the Sorcerer. I don't hear this talked about enough. It's probably the best Conan film that was ever made. Lee Horsley, the great Richard Lynch as the villain. Um, yeah, it's got problems. I ignore the sword. I just I, I hate the sword. Everybody hates the sword. The sword is terrible. Everything else about that movie is perfect, and I love it. And it just you know it came out the same year as my number four film on my list, Conan the Barbarian. John Milius, Arnold Schwarzenegger, James Earl Jones, everybody else, right? Sword and the Sorcerer is a much better Conan film than Conan the Barbarian. Conan the Barbarian is a better movie because it doesn't have that stupid sword. It's the only reason that it edges out Sword and the Sorcerer. Number three, from 1999, The 13th Warrior. This movie does not get enough love. I know it lists somebody else as the director, but we all know that Michael Crichton actually came in and directed the rest of this movie. It was an epic train wreck, but I love it. It's a great, great movie. Uh, Antonio Banderas, right, classically was offered the role in Gladiator, and he turned that down to do this. And obviously, Russell Crowe went on to greatness with Gladiator, and the 13th Warrior languished and failed, and kind of now has a cult following somewhat, but it's still, I don't hear it talked about enough. Great action sequences, just a great story, a great retelling of Beowulf, and it's wonderful. It's got a tremendous cast. Let's see, number two. This may be controversial for some, but definitely not for me. 1983, animated classic, Fire and Ice, from Ralph Bakshi, the imagination of Frank Frazetta, a script by Roy Thomas and Jerry Conway. Obviously, I love Fire and Ice. My son and I, we co-wrote a miniatures adventure game based on Fire and Ice in collaboration with Frazetta Girls and Bakshi Studios and Dynamite Entertainment. Um, it just Fire and Ice to me is the epitome of sword and sorcery. Steve Sandor's Dark Wolf is just amazing. Yes, I understand Steve Donahue doesn't care too much for the film. He thinks it's, rather generic, and I agree, it is generic, but it's also evocative, and if you have a broad enough imagination, there's just, infinite possibilities in that world that they created. And it's visually stunning. We are now at my number one. So, my number one sword and sorcery film is definitely near the top of the list of my favorite films of all time. Number one is 2022's The Northman from Robert Eggers, starring Alexander Skarsgård, Nicole Kidman, uh, Anya Taylor-Joy. Just, I cannot say enough about this movie. It's, again, it's visually stunning. It has a compelling narrative. It is an adaptation of an ancient Norse saga, Amleth, that also inspired William Shakespeare's Hamlet, which is my favorite play from the Bard. It's got swords, it's got sorcery, and it's, if you've not seen The Northman, you need to rectify this. In many ways, it emulates the narrative of Conan the Barbarian, which, Eggers has readily admitted to. It's sort of an homage to that. So if you're looking for a mashup of ancient Norse myth, classic 80s sword and sorcery cinema, and just kind of mixed in with Shakespeare, well, you've got something truly incredible in The Northman, and I recommend it highly. That's why it's my number one. And you can check out the other guys' lists in the link below so you can see how wrong they were. All right. Thanks for tuning in. We'll talk again real soon.